I kind of wish that today's readings had come around during our annual pledge campaign, because today's reading from the first letter to Timothy includes a really wonderful teaching about stewardship. But here's the thing, it doesn't really matter that it's not yet officially stewardship season, because just about any time of year can be a good time to talk about stewardship. And in fact, I think it's quite important that we sometimes talk about stewardship when we are not trying to raise money for the church, because Christian stewardship is about so much more than just money. Indeed, the concept of stewardship encompasses our total orientation toward all of the resources entrusted to us. Do we see those resources, not only our money, but also our time and energy, our knowledge and skill, our capacity for care, and our gifts for creativity and ingenuity? Do we see them primarily as possessions to be used for our own benefit? Or do we see these resources primarily as gifts, meant to be shared as widely and profligately as possible? Most of us probably fall somewhere on a spectrum between these two poles, but I would also venture that most of us trend toward the pole of possessiveness rather than toward the pole of giftedness. And this is not any particular fault of our own as individuals. Indeed, the whole of our social structure, even given its capitalistic underpinnings, encourages us to see things this way. And not only are we encouraged by our society to adopt a degree of self-centeredness, if not outright selfishness, but we are also actively manipulated into experiencing ourselves in a very primary and central way as consumers. And consumers, more often than not, are driven by a sense of entitlement to instant gratification and never-ending pleasure, which of course never really happens. But still, we keep coming back for more, believing the same empty promises over and over again. Voracious consuming has thereby become an entire lifestyle. Rather than talking about the kinds of books and movies we enjoy, we now discuss the kind of content we consume. Or perhaps it's really the other way around, as in the kind of content that consumes us. For indeed, we are consumed and even possessed by a multitude of forces that feel as if they are far beyond the reach of our understanding or agency. I read a disturbingly poignant article this past week about one of the forces that has come to control us, making it ever more difficult to be good stewards of our time, our attention, and our desire. The writer narrates her harrowing experience of making the brave and countercultural switch from smartphone to a dumb phone. And I'll quote at some length. At first, you won't be able to sit. In nervous motion, the absent smartphone will seem like the concatenation of all possibilities in all the world. Exactly all the things you will, not might, but will be missing if you don't figure out how to take another look, just a small one. Oh, how could one small look hurt you? After 20 minutes or so in this anxious state, you won't be able to fully remember what the worst moments of smartphone life were like. But gather a recollection, that feeling of overuse, a mixture of fire in the skull and a strange kind of intellectual dehydration, a wish to cycle and loop through the nodes till you get to the one sad or gross enough to give you a slightly longer break. The reason why you scrolled is that each single node was insufficient. It wasn't a one, wasn't a thing. It was easier than a one or a thing, and smaller, more petite, with its own fake inner glow. Each fake one seemed to come with less and less cost to you, but each node's presence lasted less and less long, filling you with more and more hunger each time you came to the end of its artificial presence. Moving so quickly between nodes felt like intelligence, the speed, you flattered yourself, of thought. But you knew those vaudeville arrow carnival lights you were pushing around with your thumb were not the substance of thought. And indeed, the lights said as much each time, announcing with a grin their lack of being. It was salt water that you drank. End quote. So much of our life now is like this, isn't it? We are not really our own keeper. Something else keeps us, stewards us, for its own purposes, we know not what. We can see through the mirror only dimly, trying to glimpse the mystery, the ghost in the machine. But there is, in fact, no real mystery here, just engineering. Engineering on behalf of capital, exerting invisible control over us via algorithm. Needless to say, I don't think this is what God had in mind when God created us in God's image. So how then do we move beyond disenchantment and reclaim stewardship of our own lives, moving from being possessed and consumed to creatively giving the gift of ourselves to a world very much in need of people who are fully alive? In Charles Taylor's magisterial work of philosophy entitled A Secular Age, he argues that the pervasive sense of disenchantment afflicting contemporary people is fueled, at least in part, by an acquisitive posture toward the natural world as something outside of and separate from me, which I can wield for practical, financial, and even spiritual purposes. Enchantment, alternatively, is the fruit of being a porous self, not sealed off from the world, but affected and moved by it. We increasingly experience ourselves, in Taylor's view, as buffered individuals who are sealed off from and other than the world and people outside of us, no longer experiencing a sense of unity between inner and outer worlds. And for most of us, this is not a positive development. But we are not stuck existing as buffered individuals. And indeed, participating in the life of the church can help soften our sense of separation, isolation, and alienation. But more than simply offering a context for communal engagement, the church, at its best, also invites us to explore the possibility of orienting our whole lives more and more fully toward communion with God and with neighbor. And one way we do that in the church is by focusing some of our energy on becoming more generous givers. Givers willing to make sacrificial offerings of time, talent, and treasure. And while at first we might feel compelled to give from some sense of obligation or guilt, our tradition also reveals to us the many ways that giving can be a deep source of enrichment and even of joy. In our scriptures, there are so many beautiful examples of transformative giving, like Mary of Bethany's extravagant gift of perfume, Joseph of Arimathea's care for Jesus' broken body, and ultimately, Jesus' own offering of his body and blood. There are also many teachings, often a bit more stern in tone, about the proper uses of wealth and the potential peril faced by those who hoard riches for themselves. One such teaching can be found in today's excerpt from the letter to Timothy. However, there is more joy here than might be apparent at first glance. Hear again these good words. As for those who in the present age are rich, command them not to be haughty or to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but rather on God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. They are to do good, to be rich in good works, generous and ready to share, thus storing up for themselves the treasure of a good foundation for the future, so that they may take hold of the life that really is life. What is different here than in some other exhortations to generosity and good works is the explicitly stated rationale, so that you may take hold of the life that really is life. Indeed, the author of the first letter to Timothy contends that in setting our hopes on God, who provides everything we need, and being as generous as we can be with others, we will discover the more that many of us seek. We seek more life, but more life is not to be had in being possessed by our possessions. Rather, more life is to be found by trusting in God's provision and living in an open-handed and open-hearted way toward others. It's fairly simple, and yet it is the hardest thing, because trust and surrender are so very difficult for us. We have been hurt in so many ways, so we struggle to trust that God is really with us and for us always. That is the essence of our faith. That is the reason that God incarnated in Jesus, to be with us and for us always. Amen.